Hi, friends. I think it is not even necessary to say that today, the role of automobile in the life of every person without exception is very big. Every day we get into our cars and go about our very important business. We use public transportation, and, of course, often stand in traffic jams. The number of cars, as of 2017, exceeded the mark of 1.2 billion units worldwide. And, of course, this figure is growing every day. We are used to seeing cars everywhere. They surround us as something ordinary, but at the same time it is difficult for us to imagine that some 100 years ago, such transportation could afford only wealthy people. And by the way, then few people thought about the fact that cars will soon fill the roads of our cities. But friends, I think, as you have already realized, today we will talk not just about an ordinary brand of cars, which any of us can meet in his yard. Today we're going to talk about what everyone associates with the word racing. Of course, it's Ferrari. Today we will tell you how the legend of the world automobile industry was born and why this car is chosen by the best racers of the planet. And also, we will answer the most important question, why most of the cars are red in color. And I think you will definitely like this story. Enzo Anselmo Ferrari was born under rather strange or even mysterious circumstances. The whole thing is that officially, there is not a single document confirming the real date of birth of the future genius of automobile construction. It is believed that Enzo was born on February 20th, 1898 in Modena, although he himself says that he was born much earlier. The reason for this mishap is considered to be a heavy snowfall, which simply blocked all the roads and did not allow the parents of the newborn boy to get to the city hall to officially register his birth. Ferrari's father was a steam locomotive repairman and even owned his own small workshop, where the whole family lived. The boy often remembered waking up and falling asleep to the sound of hammers. It was the very sound that stamped itself into his head forever. It was in his father's workshop that he was introduced to real rough man's work. His father easily taught him how to work with metal from the very early childhood, and often gave him a little work in the workshop. And it should be noted that little Enzo did not disappoint his father. He coped with the work as no one else. However, despite the successes in the family business, the boy realized early enough that such a life is definitely not for him. He dreamed of a job related to travel, of a bright and rich life, either as a journalist or an opera tenor. But the other he certainly did not agree. But as they say, life itself puts everything in its place. With singing, he would definitely not have succeeded. Little Enzo had no hearing and no voice either. But everything was better with journalism. Once he managed to visit one of the soccer matches, after which he wrote a small article without any difficulties, which was even published in a local newspaper. Maybe it was such an achievement that pushed the boy to another childhood dream, to become one of the successful car racers. By the way, Enzo was familiar with racing since he was 10 years old. It was at this age that he first visited his first race, which was held in Bologna. Having caught fire, he began to appear at such events more and more often, and his idols were Felice Nazzaro and Vincenzo Lancia. But unfortunately, sometimes dreams can be prohibitive, and this case was no exception. It was simply impossible for a boy from the most ordinary Italian family to become a racing driver. Where are the races, and where was our hero in old tattered pants? And his father often spent his evenings lecturing. He was sure that his son should become an engineer. That's why he tried to give him the best education. But no matter how hard he tried, Enzo didn't like to study at all. The boy often skipped school and, of course, did not do his homework. And it so happened that the boy finished school early because of the unexpected death of his father, as well as the death of his brother. It was a very difficult period, but, as they say, trouble does not come alone. On top of that, the First World War broke out, and as you might expect, the boy was immediately drafted into the army. It was there that the dream of the future racer began to slowly come true. The whole point is that he was assigned to take care of the transport, and it is worth saying that Enzo coped with this duty better than anyone else. And after demobilization, he knew for sure that he would fulfill his childhood dream, and in memory of his father, he would become the best in his business. It so happened that during the service he became very ill, so much so that even the medical staff simply stopped paying attention to him. But even here, our little guy decided not to give up and still made it through. From that moment on, he spent his whole life very carefully watching his health. In fact, after demobilization, he had nothing. He was very weak, had no education, and of course, no money. The only thing he had was just a dream, and he decided to realize it. So, having no education, but having great ambitions, he goes to Turin with only one letter of recommendation from his commander to get a job at the Fiat factory. But even here, he was not without disappointment. Arriving at the place, the guy received a very rude refusal. Fiat is not a place for former soldiers. We can't hire just anyone, was the answer of the company engineer, D'Agusorie. And such a blow the young guy did not expect. Gathering all his strength in a fist, he managed to get a job as a test driver in one of the companies in Turin, and a little later, he moved to Milan, where he took a similar position in the company Isotta Fraschini. Thanks to his courtesy and positive attitude, he quickly got rid of the prefix test and quickly became a full-fledged racing driver. He loved cars, but even more, he loved testing them and looking for all the flaws. Getting into the car, after a few minutes, he could easily answer what to improve and what to replace. He was guided only by his feelings about a particular car, and it is worth saying that his word counted. For him, a car was not just a means of transportation, it was for him an extension of himself. Thanks to its qualities in 1919, Enzo took part in his very first race on the track Parma-Bercy, and even took one of the prizes. Things went uphill little by little. He gained experience and made new acquaintances. It was in this way, in 1920, he receives a tempting offer from the leaders of Alfa Romeo, and he was invited to the post of playing coach, which Enzo, of course, could not refuse. During this period, he gets married and has a son. But few people know that the ideal husband and father was a womanizer. He always had several mistresses and even illegitimate children on the side. And by the way, he was able to recognize them only after the death of his wife. So, for example, his son Piero is currently the vice president of the company and even owns a considerable fortune, which is estimated at $4 billion. That's how, working in Alfa Romeo, Ferrari often took part in various races. He went to the start 47 times, and even 13 times he managed to take the prize-winning places. But despite all this, one day there came a moment when racing stopped attracting him. He was interested in cars, their structure, design, control mechanisms, but not in speed and victories. So, sitting by the fireplace in the evening, Enzo thought about what to do next. He did not want to continue his career as a racer, but at the same time he wanted to connect himself with cars. It was during that period that it occurred to him that he already knew enough to show the world the best car possible. It is also worth noting that at that time our hero was 39 years old, and he had already managed to earn good money on racing. Perhaps someone else would have been content with what he had, and just rested on his laurels, but Enzo felt that this was not all he wanted to show the world. But be that as it may, a dream is a dream. The reality was different. Unfortunately, he could not become a designer due to lack of knowledge and incomplete secondary education, but even that didn't stop Enzo. Thanks to his activity in the company and his outstanding oratory skills, he still managed to attract the attention of Fiat designer Vittorio Jano. Using all his savings, as well as borrowing a considerable amount from friends and colleagues, in 1939, Enzo bought land near Maranello, where he began a large-scale construction of his own workshop for the production of cars and engines. Officially, the racing team, called Scuderia Ferrari, was founded in 1929, but began producing its own cars much later. Initially, it produced various equipment for cars under the brand name Alfa Romeo. Enzo Ferrari had a contract with this company. Production was gaining momentum, but the plans of the young company were corrected by the World War II, which began abruptly. Enzo realized that sports cars were of less interest to mankind at the moment. The shop functioned in full force until 1944, when it was subjected to the strongest bombing. It took a few more years to get back up and running, but despite these difficulties, by the end of 1946, the factory was fully operational again. Our hero did not want to go back to what he had. He dreamed of his own car, and did not want to produce parts for such terrible, in his opinion, Alfa Romeo. But again, he needed manpower, and he found it. In 1946, thanks to his charisma and excellent communication skills, he poached the best engineer of Alfa Romeo, Gioacchino Colombo. He was given a global task to make the best car in the world. It is also worth noting that Enzo himself was directly involved in its creation, starting from the layout and ending with technical solutions. That's how, in a closed hangar under 7 locks, in just 1 year, in 1947, the first car of the company, named Ferrari 125, was released. The model was equipped with a powerful 12-cylinder aluminum engine, designed to realize the dream of its creator, to give an ordinary road car the properties of a racing car without compromising comfort. This car was supposed to take part in the Piacenza race, but during the test runs, it was involved in an accident, and it was not realized. It is also worth noting that even Benito Mussolini himself had a hand in the production of the first car, because some parts for the Model 125 were assembled at the factory, which he himself sponsored for the purpose of further production of military equipment. For quality labor and interest in the development of automobile industry, Mussolini awarded Ferrari with the Order of Commandery. From that moment, all Enzo's subordinates called him so. By the end of 1947, there were already 2 modifications of the Ferrari engine, and its working volume increased from 1496 to 1995 cubic centimeters. The following year, Ferrari's own team won the Mille Miglia and Targa Florio races for the first time, and 1949 brought the team a new triumph in the same competitions and even a victory in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Few people managed to produce their first car and win races with it. Time passed, and the company developed in many directions, but the main was the creation of racing cars, where any loss in the race was accompanied by a loud scandal on the part of Enzo. The best drivers of those times left him one by one. Niki Lauda, Phil Hill, Jody Scheckter. No one could stay for long. And the reason for everything was the explosive character of the genius who did not forgive mistakes and did not put up with the human factor. He used to say, "My friends are cars, and they are the only ones I can trust." Nothing stopped him, not loud fights, not even the deaths of drivers. He was clearly on his way to his goal, to create a car that changed the entire racing world. Enzo worked day and night, completely forgetting about rest. After all, when you work without rest, you do not think about death. But this does not mean that death does not think about you. Enzo was everywhere at the same time. He did not sit as a manager only in the office, but personally helped in the assembly shop and even in the dirtiest hangars. Soon, his diligence paid off again. In 1951, the stage model 340 America appeared with an engine originally developed for the Ferrari GT and with a displacement of 4.1 liters. And in 1953, the same car was equipped with a 4.5-liter engine and received a new name, 375 America. In total, by the beginning of 1954, Enzo Ferrari produced about 200 of his cars in the exclusive road version and 250 racing models. Creating his road cars, Ferrari turned to different design companies, making his models different from each other. Enzo ran ahead and did not notice anything around. But already in 1956, he was in for a shock. Enzo's son Alfredo died unexpectedly. After the loss of his son, Ferrari disappears and hardly appears at events or even comes to the races. Alfredo wanted to be just like his father to the point of madness. He genuinely admired his accomplishments, but never got to touch the Ferrari legacy himself. He died at the age of 23 from chronic nephritis. The day after his death, Peter Collins, with a mourning armband, was able to win the French Grand Prix in honor of his son Enzo. To date, it is believed that more drivers have died driving a Ferrari than driving any other car. It's a sad statistic. Having recovered a little from the loss, Enzo began to return to normal life, and in 1959 the 250 GT California appeared, which was produced to order as a vivid example of an open model of 250 GT sports type. The 375 America and its 1956 successor, the 410 Super America, of which only 14 were produced, were intended for the powerful. Their design evoked a sense of power and self-confidence. From 1957 to 1962, a modified Ferrari 250 GT California was produced with a predatory pointed profile and removable roof. This car scored its first victory in the 1960 Tourist Trophy race at Goodwood. Each race, from Delman to Targa Florio, brought more and more new honors to the company's luggage. But one day, that streak came to an end. As it turned out, due to their character and authority, the company's employees were simply afraid to give Enzo accurate information about this or that race. As a result, he, as a manager, could not make adequate decisions to solve any problem. Once Ferruccio Lamborghini himself came to Enzo to personally talk about the shortcomings of Ferrari cars, but he never managed to get into the office of the evil Enzo. Commendatore simply could not talk to anyone about his cars. This situation so hurt Ferruccio that he wanted to rub Enzo's nose in it and decided to design his own supercar, trying to lure the best Ferrari engineers to his side. Many people probably wonder how the famous emblem appeared. In fact, the history of its origin is not known to this day. Enzo told his version, the galloping stallion as the emblem of the company Ferrari, he borrowed from Francesco Baracca, heroically killed Italian pilot, on the fuselage of the fighter plane of which he was depicted. After a few years of Scuderia Ferrari's existence, I had the opportunity to meet the father of the fallen pilot Enrico Baracca. Sometime later, I also met Francesco Baracca's mother, and one day, while talking to her, she asked me if I had a car and why it didn't have any memorable insignia. It was then that I was asked to decorate my car with the emblem of a galloping stallion. "He'll bring you luck," she said, and I agreed. Of course, the emblem had to be slightly modified, adding a golden shield to the background, in the lower part of which were the letters SF, and in the upper part, the flag of Italy. The factory annually produced several dozens of supercars, which were created only under the clear guidance of Enzo Ferrari. He was the man who loved cars more than people. He put a piece of himself into each new model, and every time it gave its incredible results. Ferrari cars became more than just racing cars, they became something much more. Ferrari even now sounds very loud, associated with wealth and luxury, and by the way, it has always been so. Enzo didn't want to make ugly stumps on wheels. He always believed that a car should be such that when driving it on the road, people would stop and watch it with open mouths. And emotions, which the driver of such a car feels, cannot be bought for any money. That's what Enzo Ferrari once said. Men like beautiful girls, beautiful cars like both. Ferrari owns some of the most memorable cars of the 1960s of our century. The 250 GT was converted into the 250 GTE Fastback in 1960, and from 1962 to 1964, one of the most significant cars in history, the 250 GTO, was based on the 250 GT. A total of 39 cars were produced, possessing a 3-liter V12 engine with 300 horsepower. Further, each year the existing cars appeared and were modernized. The most successful models to date are considered such as the Ferrari Dino 246 GT and created in memory of the lost son of Enzo Ferrari, Ferrari Daytona. In this model, the engine is located at the front, and the body is more reminiscent of the American car industry of the 70s. Ferrari 512. Testarossa. This car, with an engine capacity of 5 liters and 390 horsepower, cost an unrealistic $181,000, and for the entire period of production of this model, was sold at least 10,000 copies. Ferrari Enzo, an outstanding model, named in honor of the founder of the company. Ferrari F40, a car released for the 40th anniversary of the company, where its initial price was $400,000. At the moment, its value is equal to more than $1 million. By the way, this last model was created during Enzo Ferrari's lifetime. Then there were Ferrari 288 GTO, one of which was sold at auction in 2015 for $2,750,000. Ferrari 275, one of the rarest models, only 454 copies were made, and the cost of each started from £600,000. Ferrari cars are something that cannot be simply conveyed in words. It is something that must be felt and understood. Many people wonder why almost all Ferrari cars are red in color. The answer is quite simple. It so happens that for a long time, racing cars were forbidden to use bright designs. Instead, one color was recommended for each country to paint the cars. So, for example, for France was chosen blue color, for Germany, white, for Great Britain, green, and so on. The red color went to Italy. Enzo has always been a patriot of his homeland, so he simply could not afford to build a car of another color. For example, for France, the color blue was chosen, for Germany, white, for Great Britain, green, and so on. The red color went to Italy. Enzo has always been a patriot of his homeland, so he simply could not afford to collect a car of another color. As for the hero of our video, he died at the 91st year of his life. Quietly and happily, he died on August 14, 1988, in his native Maranello. The announcement of his death was published only 2 days later. This was done at Enzo's own request to compensate for the late registration of his birth. Enzo Ferrari lived a rather modest life and rarely gave interviews. Many people were surprised and even, to put it mildly, shocked when they learned some facts about the billionaire's life. Can you imagine that a man who is known to the whole world, a man who has a huge financial fortune, connections, love for the beautiful floor, well, of course, to beautiful cars, rarely left even Modena and Maranello, except when the annual Italian Grand Prix was held in Monza, not far from Milan. He left Italian territory only once, in 1982, when he traveled to Paris. He had never been on an airplane, and in his entire life had never been to Rome or even ridden an elevator. Strange, isn't it? On April 28, 1923, still at the age of 25, Enzo married Laura Domenica Garello, and they remained married until her death. They had another son, Alfredo Dino, born in 1932. It was he who was raised as Enzo's heir, but he suffered from illness and died of muscular dystrophy in 1956. In 1945, Enzo had a second son, Piero, who was born to Enzo's mistress, Lina Lardi. And since divorce was illegal in Italy until 1975, Piero could only be recognized as Enzo's son after Laura's death in 1978. And, as I mentioned earlier, Piero is currently a vice president of Ferrari, owning 10% of its shares. Rumor has it that Enzo himself had about 9 children, but whether this is true or not is unknown. One thing is known: all of them received huge sums of money from their father, and he never refused them financial help. A couple weeks after the death of his founding father, Gerhard Berger won in Monza at the Italian Grand Prix in a Ferrari car, dedicating his victory to the creator of racing cars, Enzo Ferrari. After his death, the leadership of the company changed hands. Each new director tried to bring something different, but no one managed to overwhelm the great Enzo. At the moment, the company is in the hands of John Elkann, who is the president of the company, as well as the chairman of the board of directors. Piero Ferrari, at different periods, the company sold part of its shares to Fiat SPA and Fiat Chrysler automobiles. Today, Ferrari cars are the truest status symbol, and not only because of the fact that almost on a permanent basis, they become the favorites of Formula One races. And thanks to the fact that the company's leaders have always pursued a smart policy, Ferrari has managed to stay on the Olympus for more than 60 years, and its reputation has long been working for the development of the company. In terms of recognizability, this brand competes with such monsters of business as Disney, Hollywood, and Coca-Cola, attracting more and more attention. And every second person in the whole world, according to the survey, the association with expensive and cool cars is often Ferrari. But, as you can see from this story, all this became possible thanks to the dream of an ordinary boy, who changed his life without even realizing that at this very moment, he was changing the lives of millions of people. Nothing is impossible, and everything big always starts small, friends. And thanks to the fact that the company's leaders have always pursued a smart policy, Ferrari has managed to stay on the Olympus for more than 60 years, and its reputation has long been working for the development of the company. In terms of recognizability, this brand competes with such monsters of business as Disney, Hollywood, and Coca-Cola, attracting more and more attention. And every second person in the whole world, according to the survey, the association with expensive and cool cars is often Ferrari. But, as you can see from this story, all this became possible thanks to the dream of an ordinary boy, who changed his life without even realizing that at this very moment, he was changing the lives of millions of people. Nothing is impossible, and everything big always starts small, friends. Probably it will be silly to ask if you had an experience of owning such a car, so I'll just ask, What kind of car do you personally associate with status and wealth? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. Well, that's all for today. Rate the video if you liked it and see you soon. Bye.